Welcome to today's session on empowering instructors, mastering accessibility for inclusive learning experiences. Our presenter today is Michelle King, an L&D leader a leader in L&D and organizational effectiveness. With over 20 years of experience, Michelle has made a significant impact on organizations like SAP, NetApp, and SuccessFactors, where she's driven transformative initiatives that increased employee confidence, improved onboarding processes, and fostered inclusive cultures. Michelle is the founder of Own Your Career LLC, where she continues to empower individuals and organizations through personalized coaching and innovative training programs. Her work in developing DEIB driven career development programs and her expertise in emotional intelligence have earned her a reputation as a thought leader in the industry. Michelle is currently working on her, oh, I'm sorry, EDD. What does that stand for?
It's an education doctorate.
Ah, Education Doctorate in Leadership and Innovation. Thank you. She holds a master's in learning technologies and design and a BA in organizational leadership from Arizona State University. She's also a certified leadership and mindfulness coach and an active member of the International Coaching Federation and the American Society for Talent Development. Today, Michelle will share her insights on creating accessible and inclusive learning experiences, drawing from her extensive background in curriculum development, talent management, and organizational change. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Michelle King. I'll go ahead and hide myself from the screen and give me a second to make sure that audio and stuff is up. So hang on just a second.
Okay, I think. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Or yes. Okay, great. Perfect. All right. Well, let's get started. So first of all, welcome again to everyone that's joining from all over, which is so exciting. I love this. This is a very rich and informative session. And so it's going to have a lot of information, but I want to reassure you that if you start to feel overwhelmed by the things that I'm saying to you, I have included in this presentation 24 different resources. So everything I talk about, plus a little bit more, is going to be in the resource section. And I also have a checklist for you that is going to go over how to apply UDL to your training development. And I will share that link at the end. It's a folder on Google Drive, and you can download that, and you'll have access to all of this. So I tried to create as much rich content as I could. So let's go ahead and get started today. So what we're going to be covering is just, first of all, just understanding accessibility, applying UDL principles, talking about assistive technology, because if you aren't a person who's ever had to use assistive technology, you may not really know anything about it. And as a person that works in learning, it's really important to understand assistive technologies. We're going to go over some best practices, and then I have, if you stay to the end, a challenge for you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Please feel free to chime in and chat. I can see the chat window. I've tried to set my windows up so I can see it. And I'd love any questions. Obviously, if you have other information, so if I mention assistive technologies and you're like, hey, I know another one you're not mentioning, that's great. Please share in chat. This is a learning environment for all of us. So I'm going to learn some things today too, I'm sure. Okay, so I want to start with a question for you. Now, we're going to use a little Likert scale here, with 1 being novice and expert being number 5. How would you rate your current experience with implementing inclusive design practices in your educational or work environment? What would you give yourself a rating? This helps me to understand how everybody here, what experience everybody here has. So let's see. We're getting 2s, 3, 4, 2s, 4, 3, 5. Okay, Gabriella said 5, so you all know to go to Gabrielle if you have questions. All right. So see, this is really a good place for us to start. Do you notice in the chat, it's varied, right? So we have some people, maybe not a lot of experience. They're a beginner. There's some people who may have been doing this for a long time. So when I designed this, I designed it with that in mind. I knew that we would have a variable amount of experience in this group. So that's one of the things to keep in mind when we're talking about design, right? Who is our audience? And we all know that, but it's sometimes difficult to understand that we also kind of need to know what their experience level is. So let's take a look first of all at, and thank you all for your responses in chat. Let's take a look first of all at what do you know about disability? So I'm going to be, this is US based, by the way. This is the stats I pulled from the US. It is not global. But did you know that more than 1 in 4 adults in the United States have some type of disability? So we're getting close to 30% of people in the United States have some type of disability. And I don't know if that's surprising to any of you, but that number has increased in the last couple of years. It used to be around 25, 26%. So it has gone up in the last few years. And also, did you know that people who are disabled, 13.9% of US adults have a cognitive disability. That's something like difficulty concentrating, remembering, making decisions. 12.2% of US adults have a mobility disability. That's serious difficulty walking, climbing stairs, getting around in an environment that does not have assistance. 7.7% of US adults have an independent living disability with difficulty doing errands and tasks for themselves. 6.2% of US adults are deaf or have serious difficulty hearing. 5.5% of US adults have a vision disability with blindness or serious difficulty seeing even when wearing glasses. And 3.6% of US adults have a self-care disability with difficulty dressing or bathing. That's a lot. When you think about this population of people, we're dealing with people that have disabilities every single day. We just may not know it. And as learning and development and structural designers, people who work in this space, we need to understand that we are always dealing with people that have disabilities. Our learners have disabilities. It isn't a matter of if, it is the case. So how do we go about figuring out how to design for people that have disabilities and we're inclusive while also being accommodating? So let's first talk about what accessible learning is. And this is the thing is like accessible learning is one thing, but accommodation is a separate thing. And they go together, but they are both, it's important to define both of them. So accessibility in education refers to the design and delivery of learning experiences, right? We want them to be inclusive and accommodating to all students, and that's regardless of their physical, sensory, cognitive, or emotional needs. So you want to create an environment where everything is accessible. So when you look at this, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this picture of equality versus equity, you can see that when you have equality, that means everybody has a way to get access. But it doesn't mean that it's equitable access, right? So when we change it, we say, okay, now everybody has equitable access. That means that you have provided the tools and resources that everyone needs to meet their particular learning needs. And that's what we're aiming to do through this type of discussion we're having today, is to really learn how to do that, right? Now, when you think about this, when you want to understand that our goal is not just equity. Our goal is liberation. Our goal is empowerment, which is, notice that in this third picture you are seeing, there is no barriers at all. So in the first picture, there's a barrier and you've given everyone equal access. Everybody has the same access. But that doesn't make it equitable. So then we change it and we give people what they really need so that they can see over that barrier. But the point of what we're trying to do is remove the barrier entirely. And that's what we're aiming to do by learning about this in this session. So this is an example of when you were doing something that, if this was in a program that you were like Articulate or some other program you were creating learning in, one of the things that you would do is make sure you have a description of these photos so that someone who has low visibility or is blind could understand what you have on the screen. Now in PowerPoint, you have the ability to use the accessibility tab, and it will actually prompt you and tell you where to fill these in when you're creating presentations. And there are lots of accessibility features that I'm going to talk about today. Okay, so that's the goal. So we know what the goal is now. So how do we get there? Well, we start with universal design for learning. Now, how many of you are familiar with UDL? You've either heard of it or you use it. If you have heard of it, say yes. If you've used it, say yes, yes. Yes, yes, okay. No. Sandy, I love it. Forgot that option, huh? Okay. All right. So we've heard of it. Some people have heard of it and used it. Some people have not heard of it at all. Okay. So let's talk about it because this year they updated it. So the evolution of CAS UDL guidelines has really been a dynamic collaboration process. It's grounded in research, and the first version 1.0 was released in 2008. So we're on 3.0 now. So if you have used UDL, but maybe you haven't looked at it recently, I really encourage you to go look at their website and see what they've updated. And they do have a whole page that explains why they've updated things and what went into the process of that. One of the things I love about CAST is that they are very transparent in what they're doing. So you really understand everything that's going on. You also can offer feedback to them. And if there's something that you're like, hey, I really think it should be this way, and here's what research says about that, you can give that to them and they consider everything that people send them. So really their research varies in disciplines. It's including UDL, it's education, cognitive science, psychology, and more. And that's informed the development of the guidelines. This current version is the 5th iteration of this. So they've had 1.0, I think they had 1.5. So they've had 5 iterations of it. And really what this is it's a basis of 3 primary categories: engagement, representation, and action and expression. So when we're looking at this, I want you to think of these overarching categories as how we're aiming to design, to use these guidelines to design our trainings. So when we think about this, and this is what I'm about to put on the screen is a lot of information. I'm not going to read it to you, and I don't expect you to read it. It's going to be in here, but I just want to show you what this looks like on their website, right? Okay, so when you're talking about engagement, for instance, there's categories under engagement, and then as you can see, there are also links to different aspects of within these categories that explain to you what you need to do specifically to, for instance, increase access, to make it more welcoming and interesting, and making sure that people's identities are acknowledged, right? So they went through this process, they updated all of this, and this is now the new version of this. The next category is representation. And again, you access, support, executive function as the subcategories. And then you have what is under representation is perception, language and symbols, building knowledge. And then finally, you have action and expression. And in action and expression, you have interaction, expression and communication, and strategy development. And all of these components are part of how we go about developing our learning to make sure that it is inclusive and it is accommodating to every learner. Now, I'm breaking this down in a slightly different way for you so that you can kind of see what this means. So multiple means of engagement is the why of learning. So why are we teaching this in the first place? And how is this student interacting? So students can make choices, explicitly tell students why a lesson is relevant, offer students tips to stay motivated, etc. Then you have multiple means of representation is the what of learning. So this is things like visual, auditory, digital materials for each lesson, scaffolding in learning, simplifying complicated instructions. You'll notice throughout this presentation that it's very simple. I haven't made anything that is overly involved other than these 2 charts. And this is for your reference, not necessarily for us to go over it in detail, but we want to keep things simple as possible. I've seen things getting very colorful, and which I appreciate, but also understand that really affects other learners' ability to learn. And then finally, multi-means of action and expression, which is the how of learning. So we have the why, the what, and the how. So I just want you to think of those categories in those terms. And then that will help you to think through how to apply them more effectively, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to move forward from here, but, is it Selene? I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly. If it's not, I apologize. There is put a link to the UDL guidelines. It is also in this deck, so you'll get access to that as well. All right, so before I move forward to talk about these in a little bit more detail. Is there any overall questions about UDL or any questions about anything that I've shared so far? Okay, great. Oh, I'm glad I pronounced it correctly. Thank you so much for validating that. Okay. All right, let's take a look at a little bit deeper into this. So the Universal Design for Learning 3.0, if you look at engagement, this is exactly what it's going to ask you to be doing. You're going to provide options for recruiting interest. Okay, so let's talk about examples. So for number one, an example is offer students a choice of topics or formats for a project, like you can create a video, write an essay, build a model to increase motivation and engagement. Giving them options of how they're going to interact with this or how they're going to learn it through different means, video, writing, essay, etc. That gives people options that align better with both abilities and with accommodation, right? So if I really struggle with building a model, let's say I don't have really great spatial reasoning, then I might be able to write an essay. And of course, this sounds more like what you would do in school, but it's true for any learners. You just have to think of this in terms of like how you might apply it at work. Now, for the second one, an example might be to allow learners to set their own goals for a unit or course, providing options for how they demonstrate their understanding, such as they could do that through a presentation or a creative project or a traditional assessment. I know for me, I did not tell you up front, but I am autistic and I have ADHD. And things like traditional assessments are really difficult for me because we tend to use a lot of ambiguous language. And as an autistic person, ambiguous language is really difficult for me to manage. I'm very literal. So if you say, oh, I need that person was bending over backwards, my mind actually pictures somebody bending over backwards. So you have to really think about how your learners can provide examples of showing what they've learned. So for number three, example is create a quiet, comfortable learning space with minimal distractions and provide tools like noise canceling headphones or screen readers to support students who may be easily distracted. Now, I want to tell you that the number one rule I tell people is if you want people to learn, the environment has to be stress-free. Now, that's not completely possible. Obviously, can't ever create a completely stress-free environment. But reducing stress is important. And this is what I want you to keep in mind as we're going through this. Every single thing that requires a learner to have to then do something separately or reinterpret it or figure out how to use part of the tool, that creates stress, which then minimizes the amount of learning they're going to do. And they may abandon it entirely. So you really need to keep in mind that these things aren't just necessary to be helpful, they're necessary for learning. So for number four, use group activities and discussion to encourage peer interaction and build a supportive learning community. So collaborative tools like discussion boards or group projects. And then for number five, you could provide regular constructive feedback that focuses on specific strategies for improvement rather on grades or making sure they reach a certain score alone. You can use formative assessments, etc. So that is really encapsulating some examples of how you would meet the standards of UDL for engagement. So let's talk about how you would meet the standards for UDL for representation. So for number one, an example would be to offer course materials in multiple formats, such as text, audio, video. That's going to cater to different sensory preferences. Yesterday, I can't remember the speaker's name. She was amazing. She talked about neurodivergence. And if anybody remembers, you put it in chat. And her presentation was amazing. And one of the things, thank you. One of the things that she said in that was just that some people really want to watch it and read it. So she suggested you provide transcripts. And I urge you to provide transcripts, and not only transcripts that say what the person's saying, but also if the person is moving or doing other things, that you provide in brackets what that person is doing in the video as well. This is really important because for me, I also need to listen to it and also read it at the same time for my comprehension. When you only have one option, that person is missing out on their ability to understand that effectively. Alternatives for auditory information, visual aids like charts, graphs, and infographics to complement spoken lectures, written notes and summaries, that can be really helpful, especially for students who may have difficulty processing auditory information. Offer alternatives. Number 3, describe visual elements like charts, diagrams, images aloud, and provide tactile or 3D models if you can. If that's not as easy in the workplace, but charts, diagram, and images, which we will get into how to do that a little bit later. Those are really important because visualization for everyone that is able to see the visualization clearly is very helpful in helping to reinforce what you're talking about. And that is why you also need to have the description for people who may be visually impaired, because otherwise they're missing out on a whole section of that information. For number 4, introduce new vocabulary with definitions and examples, and use symbols consistently across the curriculum. Provide glossaries, vocabulary lists, images, or videos to support understanding. Don't just leave it at that. You're putting down how you understand it, or maybe you've discussed it and your team understands it. But remember, not everyone is going to understand it the same, and these tools help increase their chance of learning it effectively and reducing their stress. And then finally, illustrate through multiple media. Use a mix of media. Use videos, use animations, use diagram, use written text, and to explain complex concepts. You can do more than one. Give them an option for what they want to look at or what they want to use. So you could combine a video demonstration with a written guide to illustrate something like a scientific process. So that is how we meet the criteria for representation. All right, and then finally for action and expression. So for number 1, allow students to use different tools and technologies such as keyboards, speech-to-text software, or touchscreen devices. We're going to talk about some of these assistive technologies in just a moment. Number 2, you want to offer multiple ways for students to submit their work, again, such as written report, oral presentation, digital portfolios. When you offer different ways of people presenting their work, that gives that person the opportunity to really be in their learning environment that's effective for them. And then they can feel like they're meeting the criteria of the learning by being able to present it in a way that is comfortable and easier for them. For number 3, you want to make assistive technologies like screen readers, magnifiers, alternative keyboards readily available to students who need them. So we're going to talk about these assistive technologies, as I mentioned. For multimedia, encourage students to express their understanding through different media, such as creating a video, designing a poster, writing a traditional essay. And again, some of this sounds like school, but I have used all of these in my courses, specifically with cohorts where they have to write something or they have to present something. I am a firm believer in each one, teach one. So if you get people the opportunity to present it back in a way that is meaningful to them, they learn more and they learn it for a longer period of time. So you're combating Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve by doing this. Provide scaffolding such as templates, checklists, guided practice. You'll see that I'm doing all of those things in this presentation. I have tons of resources for you. I'm going to provide you a checklist. You're going to have access to this presentation. So I don't expect you to remember all of this or, even 50% of it. I'm going to give you references to do this. Oh, yes. Kayleen Holt, her presentation, if you didn't see it, please go rewatch it. It was excellent. And it really was very helpful for talking about neurodivergence and learning. And then for capacity for monitoring progress, encourage self-assessment and reflection, providing tools like rubrics, progress tracking charts, reflective journals. I do rubrics for people at work on how to create PowerPoint. There's a rubric, not a graded rubric. It's not like 1 through 4. It's more like this is excellent, etc. Right? So helping people to understand how to meet those standards and giving them rubrics, charts, journals, etc. is really helpful. So these are just some of the ways you can go about it. And what I wanted to do, just break this down for you so that it made more sense, because when you look at that chart, as I showed you, it's kind of overwhelming, right? It's like, wow, there's a lot of things here that I have to do. And that's why you will get access to the checklist that will help apply these principles easily for you at the end. I like to try to break things down as easy as possible. All right, so before I move on to the next section, which is about assistive technologies, because of course, if we're going to accommodate people, we need to know how to do that. Is there any specific questions about UDL? Is there anything that surprised you about what you just learned? Is this feel overwhelming? Just any feedback on like kind of how this whole thing feels right now. Just learning about it, especially if you're one of the people who answered like a 1 or a 2. Does this feel like, wow, that's a lot of stuff to take on right now? Because I know the first time I saw it, I thought that too. I think that providing so many options makes assessment more complicated. It does. You're right. It can make assessment way more complicated. And that's why the design of it has to be very thoughtful. There has to be a strategy for how you do it. Are there any suggestions for virtual learning? We do a lot of instructor-led trainings. Yes. So for virtual learnings, and I will make sure that I put something in the folder that's more specific about virtual learnings for you also. So what I would say about virtual learnings is really think about what you have for assistive technologies and what you're using. So if you're using Teams, if you're using Zoom, if you're using WebEx, in Zoom, there are quite a few assistive technologies. There's closed captioning. I do think there's a language closed captioning too. So if you needed to switch to some of the more standard, like Spanish, etc., there is that as well. There are other things that can help with virtual trainings. What I will say is that you should be as descriptive as possible about what you're seeing on the screen. And it's one of the reasons why I keep things simple. Because if I have to describe every picture that you're seeing or that you're not seeing, maybe, then it's going to take a lot more time. So I would say something like on the screen, you would see a picture that says design multiple means of action and expression. It's blue and it's focused on the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And then a list of what is applied to this particular category. And I'm going to read that anyway, so I don't have to say that. But it's important to just understand that being conscientious of the fact that not everyone will have access in the same way allows you to speak about it differently. Like at the beginning, I did not describe myself, which I normally would. I was a little nervous wanted to make sure I could get everything done. But normally I would describe myself to people too. I would say, I am a woman. I have, medium brown hair. I'm a Latina, but I have very light skin or kind of olive skin. And I'm wearing glasses, that kind of thing. Just so that the person can understand who's speaking. So again, out of respect for the fact that maybe they can't see me, so that helps them to create a visualization. I'm surprised my Teach Ed program didn't tell me that UDL actually comes with a set of actual guidelines. Yeah, I'm surprised about that too. That's not good. James us down the principle of assessing for the learning outcome. Yes, UDL can also enhance assessments and makes them more adaptable and possibly system, making them more authentic. Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. And this is why I love this, because you're all going to add things in the chat that will be so helpful to everybody. Okay, so let's talk about assistive technologies. It's a fascinating world, right? And it's an essential word because I want you to think about this. Everything that's created for people with disabilities is also created for everyone. So yes, a ramp may be built so that a person in a wheelchair has access to a building that has stairs. However, that ramp is used by people with strollers, people with walkers, other people that would have trouble navigating stairs, but may not be either permanently disabled or may not need to use a wheelchair all the time. So you have to remember, the automatic doors where you just push the button and the door opens. That's great when your hands are full, isn't it? Or if you have kids or you have other things you're trying to negotiate in there. So everything that is an assistive technology benefits every single person. So even though these have very specific uses, I want you to be thinking about it in terms of that might be good to have just generally because it might benefit people, right? So we're going to explore a few of them. And again, I welcome you in the chat to add in any that you may have used or your company uses or your educational environment they use, just so that we have a really robust list. So let's start with screen readers. Now, screen readers are essentially for making digital content accessible to individuals with visual impairments. They basically convert on-screen text into spoken words or braille output, and it allows users to navigate websites, documents, applications. I'm showing you two examples. One is NVDA or NV Access. It is free and it's open source. And then JAWS, which is a comprehensive option with a lot of advanced features. And that one does have a cost. There's an annual cost, and it varies depending on if you're an individual user or a business or student. So I have links to all of this in my resources. So this is really about, I can't see it, so it's converting that text for me and speaking it to me, or it's putting it into a Braille output so that I can read it, read the Braille. This is also really helpful, though, to have for people that maybe just have low vision. So myself, my vision is corrected with glasses, but I am medically blind. I'm not legally blind, but my vision is so bad that I'm medically blind. So I don't have to pay for my contact lenses. But so even though I have access to a lot of things, I use assistive tools as well, because some things are still just too small for me to read. So it's really important to understand that these just aren't just for people that are blind. They also have varying levels of visual impairment. Okay, let's see. Screen reader and Chrome extensions. Yes, there is a screen reader and Chrome extensions. VoiceOver on Mac is free too. Yep. Thank you. Keep adding to the chat. That's great. Perfect. Text to speech software. Okay, so now if I have a reading disability, or if I prefer auditory learning, I can convert written text into spoken words. So one of these that you can use is called Natural Reader. It's a popular TTS tool. So text to speech is often abbreviated as TTS. There's a free and a premium version. Read Aloud is another one. It's a simple browser extension. It reads content aloud. It's very simplistic. It helps users process information more easily and can especially use for reviewing large amounts of text. I am in my doctorate program. I often have my TTS read some of my research papers to me because I get overwhelmed with all of the information. Narrator on PC, that's another good one. So keep track of some of these. I use screen readers to read books while I'm doing laundry because doing something helps me focus. Yes, 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 yes. Exactly. This is for everyone. And so you may not have a learning disability, or you may have a disability that is ADHD or autism, things that seem invisible to people. And this is a great tool to help you with that. And I really encourage you to try out, especially the free versions. I am a big fan of building empathy for our learners by trying these things out. And I have some tools in here that simulate what it's like to have that disability. Okay, I got to move along here. Speech to text software. So speech to text software is known as voice recognition software. It allows users to dictate text, which is then transcribed into written form. It's beneficial for individuals with mobility impairments or learning disabilities. It allows them to write without typing. Even someone who may have arthritis, if I just really can't type or I have carpal tunnel, these are perfect for that. I had a friend who broke his arm one time, and it was his dominant arm, and he got this because he couldn't use his hand for a few weeks. There is Dragon. Professional is a little more expensive. It's $699. One-time payment, has a ton of features. But guess what? You can use Google Docs for free, and there is a way to turn on the voice typing feature if you've ever used that before. And then we have some other. Does anyone know if Kindle has a screen reader, or is it only for audiobooks? That's a good question. I do believe it has a screen reader, if I'm not mistaken. All right, we're getting good text in here. Thanks. Magnification tools. Remember how I said I have low vision? I have to magnify things. So it enlarges text and images on screens. It makes content easier to see. Zoom text is also by the same company that makes JAWS. It's Nuance, I think is what they're called. And again, this one is an annual cost and it varies, but you can just use the free for Windows, and I'm sure there is one for Mac as well. It includes a magnifier tool. It can easily be activated. I have links to all of this in the resource section. And so even if you're not particularly using this if you don't need to use this in a particular course you're teaching or something, these are also helpful for you to know as a learning professional so that you can help learners when they're like, I just can't see it, or I'm really struggling with this. You know where these tools are and can help them access them if they're struggling at all. So this is just to enhance the visual accessibility of digital content. Alternative keyboards and input devices, those cater to individuals with physical disabilities, typically offering customizable interfaces for easier typing and navigation, so they can use their mouse, or if they're using a mouse stick, they can use that to use a physical keyboard, or they can do that on a screen. It's way easier to do it on a screen because you can have that closer to you. Otherwise, you have to kind of have the keyboard up here. So keystrokes is one of the tools that's on here. That's on Mac. And then, of course, OSK, on-screen keyboard, is for Windows. They're both free. So if you want to use the keyboard, or somebody needs to access that because it's really difficult for them to use a regular keyboard, this is a great tool for that. Okay. We've got some responses in here too. Adriano, I think speech. Oh, giving more tools. Make sure you keep track of all these. Augmented and alternative communication devices. These are known as AAC devices. I spelled devices wrong on there. Forgive me. They support communication from individuals with speech or language impairments. So one is called ProLock2Go. It's an AAC app for iOS. It has a custom interface with symbols and text-to-speech capabilities. Touch Chat HD offers some similar types of functionality. You can express yourself through a variety of customizable symbols and voices. So if you have a communication challenge, autistic people who are nonverbal often will use these types of tools. And that way you can engage more fully in the content by being able to answer using that type of a tool through an AAC device. And again, these are two, but there are plenty of them out there. These, as you can see, are a little bit more expensive, but they're really cool. And I'm going to show you a demonstration of a couple of, not these devices, but a couple of other tools that I use. Note-taking tools, again, this is really helpful for people with disabilities. It captures, organizes, and view their notes effectively. Most of you may know now, like AI is doing this well. Zoom has an built-in AI summary feature. I've used Fathom. I've used TLDL, I think. If you have other ones that you have used for capturing notes in meetings and could be captured in a course, please put them in chat. These two are free, Glean and Eric.ai. But there are so many of them. I'm just giving you two. There are so many of them that are available now. This is becoming a great thing for people, especially like for me. I can't pay attention and take notes at the same time. It's just, that's not how my brain works. So I encourage you to check these out as well. Color contrast tools. Now, color contrast is with people with color vision deficiencies by adjusting the contrast on the screen, making content more distinguishable. ColorZilla is a browser extension. And then No Copy is another Chrome extension that simulates various visual impairments and adjusts contrast. So No Copy is a simulator and also helps you to adjust the contrast. So you can see what it looks like from somebody that has a visual impairment. So again, when you're designing digital experiences, where you want to accommodate a wide range of visual abilities, nothing like not being able to see what you're supposed to be interacting with. Okay. And then I'm going to show you a quick demo. Hopefully I can do this because I haven't done this. I'm going to switch in AirMeet. A couple of my favorites. So let me switch over. I'm going to stop presenting and then I'm going to share again. I'm going to go over here. Let's see. I want to go to, okay, I'm going to go here. Share. All right. So this is my website. It is, an older website. I haven't done much with it, but I want you to notice this. This is an accessibility menu. This is by Userway, which is linked in here, and I want to show you what it does. So if somebody comes to my website and they say, I need to change the contrast of this for visual impairment, they can click. There's one version, another version, another version. If they want, they can just turn that off. It can highlight links. It can make the text bigger. You see? It can change the text spacing. It can pause any animations. It can hide images. If you want to make it dyslexia friendly, it can show you 2-3 different types of ways to make it more dyslexia friendly. It can make your cursor bigger. And it can also do reading mode with the cursor. Okay, and I'll turn that off. There we go. Line height, saturation, low saturation, high saturation, desaturation, text alignment. You can change that, and line height. Okay. So this tool is great for being able to allow the user, remember we talked about liberation, to choose how they want this displayed rather than you having to, it just being one way and they have to try to figure it out. It's called User Way. It's in your resources. It's called User Way. It's the one on the screen, the one that I showed previously called User Way. And there's a link to that. The other one that I use is called Hyperbird. So let me share that. And this is a browser extension. Is this it? No. I gotta find the screen first, real quick. Hold on. Get my screen up. All right, where are you? Is this it? No, that is my AirMeet. Okay. I wonder if I closed it. I might have. I thought I had it open, but maybe I don't. Okay, let me see. Is it on this screen? No. I must have closed it. I'm sorry. I don't want to take up too much time trying to demo it. But anyway, it sits in your browser and let me get this back open. It sits in your browser, and what it does is it allows you to change the settings on the web page as you're reading it. So similar to UserWay, except that's not an installed tool. That's an installed tool on my website. This is an installed tool in your browser. Okay, so let's go back to this. And somehow I got way ahead of myself. So, okay, there we go. All right. Let's see. And my dog's decided he wants to start barking now too. Okay, so the other one is called Hyperbird. It's an accessibility and productivity app, and that one is something you can use in your actual browser. So if the person is doing a training that's in a browser, they're opening a browser to do it, it can help them in the same way that UserWay does. It does the same functionality, okay? So those are two of my favorites because it gives the learner the ability to choose, which I think is, actually the goal, right? We want them to be able to choose. All right, so let's talk about some best practices. So best practices are, I'm going to list them out simply and explain them simply, but this helps you to start thinking about how you can apply these things, how you can think about assistive technology. So very simply, if you want to create inclusive content, and some of this you're going to know, right? Avoid jargon. If I've worked in a lot of global companies, and one of the things I've learned to do is to not use colloquialisms and jargon, because you're talking about people who are trying to interpret, the English may not be their first language. So now they're interpreting while they're trying to learn. And now they're trying to interpret something they don't know what it means because it's a colloquialism. So reduce jargon, any kind of complex language. Clarity and simplicity are the goal, right? That's all you want because you need people to understand. And if you're making it too complicated, it's going to lose its meaning, and then people aren't going to learn what you want. Always include alt text for images and transcripts or captions for videos. Always. It's not an optional thing. I've seen a lot of people have a video and then they have like closed captioning. That's not enough. You need a transcript, and there are a lot of transcript generators. AI can generate the transcript for you. So please use that because it's so helpful to learners, especially neurodivergent learners, other people that have cognitive disabilities. It's incredibly helpful to have both. Use high contrast between text and background colors. Notice through this whole presentation, I have darkness and light text for the most part, or I have a light background with dark text, but it's all consistent. It's all the same. Now you may think that seems kind of boring, right? But the reality is that helps people learn because it's clear. And I'm using colors. Blue is one of the more universal colors for color blindness that people who are colorblind can see. So there's a lot of red, green. There's other colors that, and there's a link that you'll be able to see a simulator of this later on. But it's really important to understand that we want to make sure that there is colors that are being used that can help the learner, not ones that just look good, right? Links should clearly describe the destination. Don't put click here, read more. Instead, phrases like download the report, visit the accessibility guide, tell them what it's doing, because if they're using a screen reader and it says click here, that they don't know what they're clicking here for necessarily. All right, ensure that all interactive elements such as buttons and forms can be accessed and used via the keyboard alone. So if they need to use a keyboard, it can be accessed that way. That's for users who cannot use a mouse. Some people cannot use a mouse, right? Use headings and lists to organize content logically. This only helps with, not only helps with the readability, but also improves navigation for screen readers. One time I went to, I want to say it was MIT's free education site, and we were doing an empathy exercise, was using a mouse stick to navigate it. It was so horrible because the navigation wasn't in order, and I couldn't easily get to what I needed to without having to use the mouse stick many times to get there. That is not a good experience for learners, right? Regularly test your content using accessibility checkers, tools like screen readers to identify and fix accessibility issues. If you're not using the tools, you're not going to know if there's an issue. And I'm not saying you have to use all of them all the time, but things like screen readers are pretty important. And then always provide content in various formats, text, audio, video, so that there are different learning preferences and also accessibility needs. That's how you meet that liberation, because you're removing the barriers. Can you explain this to Andrea? However, good to keep accessibility friction in mind. Some communities struggle with overlays. Can you explain that? Yeah, Andrea, can you explain a little bit better what you mean by that? We'll see what she puts in chat. Some people's accessibility call. Yes, that's true. Yes, okay, that makes sense. It does, and that's true. And so that's why giving options is important. We don't want to throw everything at everyone, but you want to have people set up for success. Most people who have low visibility have screen readers already, so it's not something you have to worry about, but you should test it with a screen reader. It's not that you have to provide the screen reader. It's like, hey, does this actually work in a screen reader? Does it make sense, right? And yes, definitely be prepared to make adjustments. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, it is 100% impossible to be accessible now. I think we're going to continue to improve on that, but it is our responsibility to try to create as much accessibility and accommodation as possible. All right, so we're going to do a challenge. So hopefully you're all up for it. All right, we're going to dive into this little challenge here, and I'm going to show you something and read it off to you, and then I'd like you to respond in chat what you think. All right, everyone can see this map, correct? So this is a learner challenge that simulates what it looks like for a person who has red-green color blindness. This map actually has red and green and yellow on it. But if you are red-green colorblind, this is what that map looks like for you. Okay? Now I'm going to read the instructions that were given to this person. They're going on a trip, and they were given instructions on how to navigate the metro system in Washington, D.C. And I want you to be thinking about what's wrong with these instructions and how might you say things differently, because this happens to learners all the time. So you're colorblind, and then this is the instructions you get. Okay, to get from Washington National Airport to the hotel, you need to jump on the yellow line going north at the airport. The yellow line doesn't go all the way to the hotel, and you'll need to transfer to the green line along the way to get there. Anybody know where they're going? Right? Because if you can't see these colors, what would be happening? You'd be like, I don't know, right? Now, they're going to go to then the Smithsonian. And so the next instructions say there are several different ways to get to the Smithsonian from the hotel, but the most direct way is probably to hop on the green line and then transfer to the orange or blue line. Right? Now, keep in mind that also color, if you have color blindness, it changes the color for you. So that kind of brownish color is actually green for a person that doesn't have color blindness, but it looks brown to the person who does have color blindness. So they're now going to be confused, right? And then finally, don't forget we have an opening reception with the folks from the Smithsonian scheduled at 7 p.m. at Wardman Park Hotel, which is at the Woodley Park stop on the Metro. Just consult the map. It's pretty simple. Yeah, which one is the yellow line? Exactly. So tell me, what could you do differently to explain this map instead of using color? Like, what kinds of ways could you go about this? You don't have to be complicated about it, just something simple. Yes, the map doesn't have color words. So there's one thing you could do. That could say that this is the green line, this is the blue line, this is the red line, right? So yes, definitely. Stars, numbers, labels, color code with text, circles, lines, arrows. Could have a color key with the words, name the stops, use cardinal directions. Yeah, you could change the symbols instead of just circles, right? So this is what I'm telling you, is that it seems simple, right? I'm going to give this map and here's the instructions. But if I'm a colorblind person, I have no idea what's going on now. And imagine how that person feels, like wanting to, I can't read this map. Like, what do you say? I coach, I'm a leadership and career coach, and I can't begin to tell you the number of people that have come to me that confess to me that they're dyslexic, but have never told anybody at work. So the problem is that a lot of the time you don't know. And if somebody's looking, I mean, imagine if you're dyslexic looking at this map, right? This is too complicated a map for the instructions. And we need to simplify them. This is too complex. It's too confusing. And if I'm colorblind, it's not going to help me. So this is what I want you to see, is this is what happens and how difficult it is to navigate that as a learner when you just want to learn, right? Okay, so the key takeaways are, I didn't fill them in. I just realized that. Sorry about that. But we're going to go into some Q&A right now just to see if you have any questions. I will put the key takeaways in. This is what happens when you get 4 hours of sleep. But what I want to say about this entire thing is that the purpose of this was to help you kind of think about this in terms of how you would start to prepare yourself for designing, mastering how to design using UDL, knowing full well that, of course, you're never going to be perfect, but knowing what these technologies are, what the principles are, etc. And I want to show you, as we're going in, if anybody has any questions, just the list of resources I have for you. So here's the first list, here's the second list, here is the third list, here is the fourth list. And so I have 24 different resources in here for you. And one of the things that I want to show you is that I have on this last page a dyslexia simulator, a color blindness simulator, and UserWay has different disability simulators. And one of the things I urge you to do as a learning professional is to go and take those simulators, use them, and see what your learners experience, because it will build empathy towards you in your design, and also in just understanding how much more complicated it can be to navigate this as a learner if you have a disability. Karen, it seems like that would take a lot more time. What do you mean? In designing this way? Oh, I'm going to give you a link to it right now. So let me stop sharing and let me get that out of here. And let's see. My link is over here. All right, this is a link to the folder with this presentation. And there you go. This has a link to the folder that has this presentation and a checklist in it for UDL design for you to use. There's a whole bunch of comments in here as well. So feel free to, keep track in the chat. Yes, designing UDLs that take more time. What I would say is, once you have a strategy for how to do it, it doesn't take more time. But initially, yes, it's going to take a little bit more time to get used to it. But once you have a strategy, and that's why I provided you the checklist, that will help you go through and figure this out. But in the meantime, you should explore these resources. And like I said, take these simulators, see what your learners have to experience if they have a disability. Any questions about anything else that we've talked about today? I know we've got about 4 minutes left, so just want to make sure. All right, so was this helpful for everyone? I know it was a lot of information. Thanks, Nancy. But like I said, that's why I gave you the presentation and the checklist. And I will also put a couple of other things in the folder that I think would be good resources. Really encourage you to explore all those resources. Hi, Lewis.
Hello. Thank you. That was great. Fantastic, Michelle. This was really, really good.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Let's see.
I'm so happy to kind of help people to understand it. It is overwhelming, especially when you first start looking into it. And so, I wanted to kind of break it down. So I'm glad that worked out. Thanks so much, everyone, for attending. I really appreciate it. Is there any questions? I see something.
Yeah, I'm just taking a look.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so the resources in chat. Let's see, I will put it in here too. There you go. So that's for Lindsay. I don't know how to mark things answered. Do you like click? Can you say again how we'll get your materials? Yep, it's in the chat. And then somebody else put it in the chat too. Okay, perfect. Yes. And at the end, I put in my LinkedIn, and my email address is at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, you'd like to chat about this. I am always happy to help and have conversations with anyone who wants to learn more.
Right. Okay, oops, let's see. I saw one thing pop up in Q&A. Oh, okay. Here's one question. Let's see. Oops, let me show it on. Wait, how do I get that? It's from Gabrielle. Do you know of any tools to test for dyslexia?
Yeah, the dyslexia simulator that I sent you, that will show you what it's like. But User Way has also tests for dyslexia. Here's what I will say to you though, Gabrielle. Dyslexia is actually very complicated. There are many different forms of dyslexia. So when you test, it's typically you should test with somebody who is a professional, because there's like 7 or 8 different types of dyslexia. So you need to know which kind you have. Like some people, it's just the letters flip. Some people, the text moves constantly, right? I mean, it's very different. Some people, it's like some letters are backwards and some letters aren't. Some people, it's the spacing. So it's really important that you get a professional diagnosis if you think you're dyslexic. But if you go to that User Way link, you can see some of the ways there's tests and things like that to help you.
Nice.
Okay. Anything else?
All right. Lindsay Ross is asking, I'd like to learn more about navigating with a keyboard. Do you know any resources that could help with this?
Yeah, in this presentation, there are resources, links at the end for the Windows one and the Mac one that give you all the instructions on how to use that and explains what it is. That's the most helpful because those are free resources. So definitely use that.
Excellent.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right. Well, thank you everyone so much. This has been great.
Yeah. And it's our Arpita had just posted something in chat, a helpful link for dyslexia possibly. Another question. This one is from Brittany. What's the best approach in your opinion for managing accessibility versus branding guidelines?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yes, when you get branding guidelines and the fonts, you're like, oh no, this font is not good. And so it is something that you have to bring up with your marketing team or with whoever is really handling your branding to ask about whether these have been tested for accessibility. Again, like PowerPoint, if you're using branding for PowerPoint, for instance, there's an accessibility checker in there. So making sure that your branding has all been checked for accessibility. So for instance, when I had my first slide up, it had like blue lines on it. I don't need the screen reader to read that these are blue lines. So I just mark that as decorative. And so your branding for things like PowerPoint should be marked in that same way. These things are decorative. Then when you add something in, you're going to have to add the text about it. Or if there's something that's standard, there should be all text already there. If not, then encourage your team to add that for screen readers.
Yeah, I've seen that. That can be a real challenge. I've seen that conversation before, and the marketing team can really put their foot down on certain things. But yeah.
Well, it's like colors. Red is really the worst color. I love red, but it's not great for people that are neurodivergent. A lot of people are neurodivergent. It's really a difficult color for them to handle, like seeing it over and over again. And it's also not good for people who have red-green color blindness. So you really have to think through whether this branding is helping your learners learn. And if not, can you have an alternative branding? Yeah, excellent. For that. Awesome. Well, I know we're
Okay.
over time, but
Yeah,
thank
we're
you
over
so
time. So
much.
that's it. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
We'll see you in the next one.
everyone.
Yeah, we've got Toddy Norm coming up at 12 p.m. Pacific, workplace disability accommodation. So kind of a nice segue
Yeah.
into from here. So we'll see everybody in that next one. Thanks again, Michelle.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.